Welcome to Crime Maze. In this video we are going to talk about 5 Christmas murders. Before starting this video, like this video and subscribe to Crime Maze channel for future updates. Getting together with family and stuffing our faces with food is what Christmas is all about. Many people all over the world consider it to be their favorite day of the year. However, for some, Christmas is just another day, and if someone is planning something violent and sinister, the celebrations will have little effect on their decision-making. In this section, we will look at 5 murder cases that occurred around the time of the year's most festive celebrations. Number 5. The Anderson Family Massacre. In 2007, the Anderson family would experience a Christmas that was unlike anything they could have imagined, even in their most terrifying nightmares. The reason being that Joseph Thomas McEnroe and Michelle Kristen Anderson had something particularly heinous planned for this year. Michael's parents, Wayne and Judy Anderson, lived in Carnation, Washington, and Joseph and Michelle drove there on Christmas Eve, armed with their weapons of choice. On entering the family home, they were greeted by Judy, who was in the process of wrapping Christmas gifts for their grandchildren, who would be arriving later that afternoon. While Joseph confronted Wayne in the living room, Michelle occupied her mother with a game of charades. Wayne was killed first, and then the couple turned the gun on Judy, killing her as well. Later, Joseph and Michelle dragged their bodies to a shed in the backyard, where they spent an hour cleaning up the blood so that it wouldn't alert the other family members who were expected to arrive shortly after. Upon their arrival at the house, Michelle's brother Scott Anderson and his wife, Erica, as well as their 2 children, 5-year-old Olivia and 3-year-old Nathan, were all gunned down in the living room by both Michelle and Joseph. Erica was able to call 911 while she was dying, but the line went dead immediately. The 2 deputies who arrived to respond to the 911 call were turned away by Michelle and Joseph after they had murdered the entire family. Michelle and Joseph then left the house, locking the gate behind them. When Judy's co-worker became concerned when Judy failed to show up for work or respond to her phone calls, it would take another 2 days before all of the bodies were discovered. Michelle Anderson and Joseph Thomas McEnroe were both found guilty and sentenced to life imprisonment. Number 4. Grapevine Christmas Shooting. On Christmas Eve in 2011, Aziz Yazdanpana dressed up in a Santa Claus suit and went to his estranged wife's apartment in Grapevine, Texas, under the pretense of delivering gifts for his family. According to police, as soon as he entered, Yazdanpana fatally shot his estranged wife, Fatme Ramadi, 55, their 14-year-old son, Ali, and their 19-year-old daughter, Nona, all of whom were killed. He also shot and killed Zara Rahamathi, 58, her husband, Muhammad Hossein Zarii, 59, and their daughter, Sarah, 22. He also shot and killed his wife's sister, Zara Rahamathi, 58, her husband, Muhammad Hossein Zarii, 59, and their daughter, Sarah, 22. Following the murders, Yazdanpana took his own life by shooting himself in the head. Police were called to the scene after receiving a 911 call from inside the residence. No one was injured. The only thing they could hear was heavy breathing followed by a raspy "help." By the time they arrived, everyone had passed away, surrounded by the freshly opened Christmas presents arranged around the tree in front of them. The mass murder was the deadliest in the town's history, according to locals. An investigation into the murders revealed that Yazdanpana and Zarii pretended to their wives that they were going on business trips in order to avoid being discovered. In reality, they were reserving hotel rooms and transporting prostitutes back to their homes. Zarii is said to have told his wife about his exploits, but he did not disclose his involvement, telling her that only Yazdanpana was renting hotel rooms to transport prostitutes to. It is speculated that this contributed to the dissolution of his marriage. Ramadi and her 2 children relocated to an apartment in the 2500 block of Hall Johnson Road after their marriage ended in dissolution. The impending divorce had not gone down well with Yazdanpana, and Ramadi had informed her colleagues that she was concerned about what he might do next. Yazdanpana had been experiencing financial difficulties in addition to her marital difficulties for some time. Yazdanpana was sentenced to 3 years probation in 1996 after pleading guilty to 1 count of subscribing to a false income tax return. According to federal court records, he was fined $1,000 and ordered to pay back $30,119 in restitution. Several years before the murders, Yazdanpana was forced to leave her job in the mortgage business, which exacerbated her financial difficulties even further. 5 Yazdan Pana was living in a home with no electricity or running water at the time of the murders, whereas Ramadi was living in an apartment and working 2 jobs at a local spa at the time of the murders. Number 3. The murder of Tristan Allegra. Aaron Allegra, a resident of Port St. Lucie, Florida, began experiencing financial difficulties in August of 2007. Allegra appeared to be hopeless after she was fired from several jobs and ended up in a relationship. Allegra had a son, Tristan, who was 8 years old at the time and a student at Mariposa Elementary School. According to his classmates, he was extremely kind and helpful, as well as cool and humorous. He enjoyed reading and was a chatty young boy. He was in the 3rd grade. 6 Allegra and Tristan's father, Michael, had divorced several years before, but they shared joint custody of their son at the time of the incident. Tristan received 8 Advil from Allegra after midnight. He fell asleep quickly, and at around 3 a.m. Allegra smothered her son with a pillow until he stopped kicking in his sleep. Although she was initially concerned that he would overdose on the pills, her fears soon turned to concern that they would simply turn him into a vegetable. 8 When her son's breathing stopped, Allegra went into the bathroom and climbed into the bathtub, where she slit her wrists with a razor. She left several notes, one of which stated, "Extremely kind and helpful, as well as cool and humorous. Thank you for being such a sweet boy all these years," I said. Allegra, on the other hand, did not die because the blade was far too dull. Allegra called the authorities when it became clear that her suicide attempt had failed. Despite having pleaded guilty, Aaron Allegra was sentenced to life in prison. Number 2. Ronald Gene Simmons. While on leave from the Air Force during the Christmas holidays of 1987, Ronald Gene Simmons, a retired Air Force sergeant, murdered 14 members of his own family before killing 2 members of the Russellville community. He murdered his son Gene and his wife Rebecca on the 22nd of December, making them the first victims of his crimes. Both were killed by a .22 caliber pistol shot in the head. His next victim was his 3-year-old granddaughter Barbara, whom he strangled to death before waiting for the rest of his family to return home before proceeding to the next victim. Simmons lured 4 of his children, Loretta, 17, Eddie, 14, Marianne, 11, and Rebecca, 8, away from the rest of the family under the pretense of giving them Christmas gifts. He then strangled them to death while holding their heads underwater. The rest of the family arrived on Boxing Day to join us in celebrating Christmas. On arrival, Simmons shot and killed his son Billy as well as his wife Renata before strangling their 1-year-old son Trey to death with a rope. The next victims of this sadistic character were his daughter, Sheila, and her husband, Dennis, who were both shot to death by this sadistic character. Simmons had a daughter out of wedlock. Sylvia, who was 7 at the time, was the daughter of Sheila and Simmons. This was disturbing. Sylvia was strangled by Simmons after she had killed Sheila and Dennis. 9 His grandson, Michael, who was 20 months old at the time, was the final victim of his own family. Immediately following the massacre, Simmons laid out the bodies of the victims in the lounge before heading to a nearby bar for a drink. He was found guilty of 16 murders and sentenced to death. He was executed on June 25, 1990, as a result of his conviction. Number 1. Covina Massacre. It was Christmas Eve in 2008, and a party was in full swing at the Ortega residence in Covina, a neighborhood in the Los Angeles metropolitan area. Their daughter, Sylvia Ortega Pardo, who was 43 years old, was among the approximately 25 people who joined them for the celebration. She desperately needed the family gathering. She had been experiencing marital difficulties with her husband of 1 year, Bruce Jeffrey Pardo, and had recently announced her intention to divorce him just a few days before it happened. There was a knock on the door around 11:30 p.m. and it was the police. Sylvia's sister's 8-year-old daughter dashed to the door and flung it open with a yell of delight. Bruce Pardo, dressed in a Santa Claus suit and carrying a package, stood in front of her and demanded her attention. When Pardo pulled out a 9mm semi-automatic handgun and shot the young girl in the face, she had a look of delight on her face, but this quickly turned to fear. Pardo then entered the house and began shooting at the guests without regard for their intentions. 9 people lost their lives as a result of gunshot wounds or the fire. Sylvia and both of her parents were among those who passed away. The miraculous survival of an 8-year-old girl who was shot in the face is a testament to the power of God. When Pardo returned home after the massacre, he drove to his brother's house and shot himself in the head there. What do you think about this video? Do let us know down in the comments section below. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear from us again, be sure to hit that subscribe button before you go.